Okay. All right, cool. So welcome to the August conference. And go ahead and mute yourself, Mr. Dominic. And then you can, there you go. Cool. Awesome. So today we're going to be talking about basically how to use the type grid. And Mr. Domes, can you confirm that you're listening? Because I was hoping alongside this, okay, yes, you are listening because I saw you unmuted yourself. So it's good to go. Yeah, you're good to go. So we've been working on like how to use the type grid, and there's a lot of vectors with which the type grid that we haven't even talked about. So I really want this recording for this CSJ conference for August to actually have something to do with the how to use the type grid documentation that we're actually going to be releasing. So we're going to be talking about various vectors with which can be done to achieve that. So currently right now, we're aware of the two main ways. Interaction styles, which we're actually changing that over to communication styles so we don't get sued. Same thing with temperament. We're going to be changing that to disposition, basically, so we don't get sued. And those are going to be some of the first few things that are going to be applied to the type grid, or they actually already are applied to the type grid when it gets re-released. And obviously, we have interaction styles being, structure, starter, finisher, and background. And then also for temperaments, we have guardian, artisan, intellectual, and idealist, etc., following Plato's Republic model presented by the Greeks. So that's great. Those are just literally just two ways of going about it. So I'm going to share my screen and go into whiteboard mode here. We're actually going to I'm going to build out a type grid, and we're going to actually list out each of the different vectors that are available. And interestingly enough, a member of the audience actually created a new vector for use on their own, and they submitted it to me. I'm also going to be sharing that with you folks today as well, that particular vector, because I think it's very interesting, and it gives you an opportunity to use the type grid in a completely different way than we have previously. So let's see how I could do that. Share whiteboard. Awesome. And can you guys see my whiteboard here? Let's see here. Awesome. Let's do a different color. Okay, so I'm just going to fill out the type grid right here. So ESTJ, and then we have ESTP, and then ENTJ, and then ENFJ. And then we have ESFJ. So as I'm filling this out, remember when you're using the type grid, you're supposed to try to basically utilize it in the form of deductive reasoning, right? Because you can still type somebody, not necessarily by identifying them forwards, but you can also identify them backwards. And that's one thing that I think a lot of the members of this community have yet to realize, is how you could use logic to use deductive reasoning to eliminate choices on the type grid to figure out who you are. Everyone's trying to use the type grid from a proof positive point of view, where it's like, well, I know I have these traits, so I'm this. That's not necessarily good enough. You need to use two different ways. So forward reasoning and then deductive reasoning for deduction. Because if you don't do that, you're not really verifying what you believe in terms of the type grid itself. And that's one of the biggest challenges that we've had, especially when doing coaching sessions with people, because they're too busy saying, hey, I have these traits, and then this is obviously what type I am. But the reality of the situation, that's not actually true. That's really not actually the case. So here's the structure types, and then the starters, and then the finishers, and then the backgrounds. Can everyone see the whiteboard appropriately? I'm just double checking here on that.
Yes.
Cool. Awesome. We're writing a little bit to the right as well. So artisans, intellectuals, and then the idealists. Okay, so this is a standard type grid. Now, granted, we have communication styles as the first vector. And that's where you try to identify, if your structure, starter, finisher, background, etc. And then there's also, so there's 4 styles, and then 3 points of testing. Now, the fact that it's 3 is very useful because when you're able to like test if is this direct initiating control, right, or is this informed initiating movement, you have 3 points. If you get 2, it still counts towards that. If you have just 1, not necessarily, because that 1 could apply to other locations as well, because 2 of these are movement based and 2 of these are control based, 2 of them are informative, 2 of them are direct, for example. So you can't just survive on 1 identifier. So 3 points of identifications or identifiers that go in for communication styles. Well, guess what? It's the same thing for disposition. It's the exact same thing because on a disposition standpoint, you have 4 the 4 temperaments, etc. And then you have 3 identifiers each. Great. Pretty standard. Everyone is aware of that. Now, what you could do is you have to treat this like times tables, okay? So, hey, I know my guy is informative. This is excellent. So if we're informative, that automatically eliminates these types here. And then, so we just eliminated 8 types because there's informative. Okay, well, I know that they're actually movement. Okay, well, we've just eliminated yet another 4 types. Great. So just using the interaction style vector and identifying that they're a starter vector, you've eliminated 12 types and you're down to 4, right? And then you eliminate their disposition. Or you don't even have to do this. You just actually, they're definitely not abstract. So you've just eliminated half the types just by that. They're not abstract. And, I don't think they're systematic either. So you've just eliminated 12 types right there. And they're an artisan, right? But what happens when you combine both ways of doing things? Well, you've eliminated X amount of types down here. You've already eliminated these types down here because of informative and direct, right? So they're not direct, but they are informative. And then they're not responding. And then all of a sudden, this person's an ESFP, right? Through logical deduction. Why do people have such a hard time doing it this way? The reason why is because they don't first believe that the type grid is law, basically. They have to first come to the belief, the truth, that the type grid is absolute. It is law. It is a fact. The type grid itself is like the laws of thermodynamics, like entropy. It just is. The sooner they can come to that conclusion, the better, because then they realize that instead of trying to identify their type by saying, okay, well, I know I'm movement, so I'm automatically these. So instead of it becoming an elimination game, it's a positive game. And they're like, oh, well, I know I'm these types here because I know I'm movement, right? But I also know I'm abstract. So I automatically know I'm one of these 4, okay? Well, I'm abstract and I'm movement. But I'm always focused on what I can get out of things and whatever. So that makes me interest-based. So that means I'm automatically one of these 2. And then I'm like, okay, well, am I informative or am I direct? oh, I'm informative, so that means I'm an ENFP, right? And that's how they use the type grid from that direction. So they do it through like forward elimination versus reverse elimination, but it's all deductive reasoning. Here's the problem. Both ways are incorrect unless you do both ways. You have to do it both. If you can't test a type grid going forwards and backwards at the same time with any of the main vectors, then you're wrong. The reason why you have to do it backwards and forwards through your elimination is because you're trying to prove to yourself that your first result is correct. If you're doing it backwards, well, your result, great, you got a great result, but you got to do it again, but this time you got to do it forwards. Okay, verify it again. Does it still work going the other direction? Like multiplication tables do, right? You know, 8 times 8 is 64. It doesn't matter which direction you're coming from the left or the right, you're still going to get the same end result, 64. Doesn't matter when you're using a multiplication table. It's the same kind of thing with the type grid. You're getting the same result. So you have to use forward reasoning and reverse reasoning when you're deducing which type you are, but you have to do it twice to really know. Here's the difference though. There are, guess what, other ways of doing this. So there is the, so these are communication styles forwards. We'll put a plus sign, disposition style forwards. But there's also comm style backwards, which is negative. And then there's also disposition negative. So let's talk about these two new vectors with the type grid. And what do they actually mean? Think about it. What types have XYZ traits but are missing other traits? Okay. So let's see if I can actually pull up a bookmark of mine. Let's see here. Okay. So you look at it this way. What types are not direct initiating control, right? What types are not direct initiating control? And then no direct responding movement, no informative initiating movement, you know, and no informative responding control. Okay, but then you have the temperaments going across as well, right? Reverse temperaments, right? So I'm going to give you guys a photo that was provided to me in the chat, and I'm actually going to change my share from the whiteboard. So I'm going to stop the share. I'm going to share again, and this time I'm going to share this image provided to me by a member of the audience. All right, can everyone see this picture now? Okay. So if you notice this picture, this is a completely different way of looking at the type grid, right? So you have the types that are not no informative initiating movement. Then you have no informative responding control. So you have responding on the corners. You have initiating on the corners on both sides. But then you also have movement on the right side and control on the left side, basically, right? But they are what they are not, okay? So this is a completely different way of looking at the type grid and using the type grid to eliminate types, reverse or positive, basically, by just simply looking at which communication style they don't have and which disposition, aka temperament, that they don't have, all right? So what this provides is 2 additional vectors with which to look at the type grid just based off of this way. Now I got to give credit to where it's due because the person who came up with this is a member of the audience. My goodness, I need to turn off my thing here. Let's see, turn off notifications, please. Quit, can't quit fast enough apparently. Okay, so, all right. So with that being said, it's important to understand that, you know, you have this option available to you as well, Now, this person, labeled this discord or dynamic or successor and inceptor. Inceptor being people who are, I think it's like they're trying to change perception, etc., change thinking for the most part. Dynamics to try to always keep things fresh. I don't necessarily agree with these names, actually. I don't. But still, the way that they're being presented is a way that actually fundamentally works when you apply logic directly to the type grid. Now, I understand that this makes the type grid to look like a completely different other type grid. I get that. That's fair. But the difference is that when you're looking at, okay, which types are not direct initiating control or not, and have their, their temperaments going out in that way, it's like, okay, what are they not? And then it allows you to, again, slowly eliminate and then pinpoint exactly which type you are with the type grid, right? That's just one way of doing it. Let's go back to the whiteboard. All right, so we have the whiteboard back. And as you can see, we have these particular, we have these 4 vectors, but here's additional vectors here. We have cognitive axis analysis. Okay, and then another vector after that, we have quadras. Analyzing quadras. And this is what we've done typically, like on the How to Type live streams. We usually just focus on communication styles, dispositions, cognitive axis analysis, and quadras. There's another vector. This one's really hard, but possible. Cognitive orbit. Now, what's great about cognitive orbit is that if you're actually able to pull off a cognitive orbit, which is very hard, and for my own personal skill level, it's really hard for me to do. I wouldn't expect people to be able to do cognitive orbit. I'm still playing with it. I'm still memorizing it, basically, is what I'm saying. But cognitive orbit's really hard. So let's talk about how cognitive orbit actually works, okay? Well, actually, let's talk about cognitive axis and quadras and then cognitive orbit, right? So we have, so cognitive axis, and then for perception functions, we have NE plus SI. And then we have SE plus NI, okay? And then we have judging, which is TE plus FI. And then we have I'll actually do FE plus TI, okay? So axis analysis. And let's look at it this way, in terms of quadras, okay? So quadras, you have SFJ plus NTP, okay? And then you have STP plus NFJ. And then you have SFP plus NTJ. And then STJ plus NFP. So these are the quadras. Super important. So cognitive axis analysis is like super important because when you're talking to somebody, their sentences actually equal to a cognitive axis. So the reason why is because, when someone says, I like that idea, which cognitive axis is that coming from? I like that idea. Would someone from the conference like to answer that question? I like that idea. Which cognitive axis is that statement?
TEFI?
That is correct. Because you're literally saying, I like that idea. When you're saying that idea, it's a TE statement. Okay? When you're saying I like, it's an FI statement. However, when someone says I like what I think, very different. Okay? I could actually be applied to both in the judging, because to think is a judgment, right? It's either what they think or what I think. However, when you say I feel is typically an FI statement, although it can be an FE statement, because what is their feelings based on? When you say I feel, your feelings are based on what people generally feel is a thing, or they also say, or I like something based on, or I feel about something based on how they as an individual feel. It's like an SE user. The SE user is saying, well, I'm uncomfortable about this. You'd think that's an SI statement. But in reality, they're an SE user. It's because the SE is reacting to something how anyone in general would react to something, because they're all about reactions and knowing reactions of people, psychologically speaking. They just know in general how people react and how things would be sensitive to others, but they just assume that's how they are sensitive. They're placing their own sensitivity within a crowd of people who might be sensitive to something. It's a generalization. Just like an extroverted thinker, like a few people on this call, think about things how people would in general. It's not what they think themselves individually. So when they say the word I think, it's actually about people, what people think in general. This is why I call extroverted thinking right here. This is why I call it group think, because it really literally is group think. It's how people think in general, right? So the thing is that TE also could be like stats. And sometimes there's good stats and there's bad stats. It could also mean value. And there's good value. So good being FI, the word good is FI, okay? So good stats versus bad stats. It's like, someone on the call here is a business owner and they're like, oh, these are really good numbers. We're having a really good quarter right now, right? He's literally saying how he feels about the numbers. And it's how the individual feels. I feel good about these good numbers, these good sales results, this quarterly report, or this good current ratio. Current ratio is also TE. So that's why TE users are very good financially capable. So that's why people like Domesday's an INFP, they can become very capable day traders, specifically because of TE. TE lets them keep track, and because they know the value of things, it's all about value. It's all about weighing things out. Everything is weighed out to an extroverted thinker. Everything. It's kind of like when you had, back in the day, you had weights, right? You have to put a certain amount of gold to equal a weight on a scale in order to buy something from somebody. And provided that the scale or the weights were not fake, the gold itself, as long as that person was honest, that gold would, the value that's attached to that gold, that buying power, basically is a human interpretation, right? Which is extroverted thinking versus introverted feeling. That's why gold has intrinsic value and paper money does not. Although paper money itself is propaganda. Paper money, like propaganda, is also TE. Why is that? Because paper money, or the value of things, are nothing more than opinions, right? They're nothing more than opinions. So you have your own feeling based on the opinions of others, but then you also are opinionated. This is why TE users, I don't maintain as thinkers. I think them as opinioners, basically. they're all about opinion. It's not about what's actually true or false. They claim, extrovert thinkers claim that certain things are true and false because they feel good about an opinion that's readily or widely accepted. And if it's widely accepted, how couldn't it be true, basically, right? It's extroverted thinking. It's not actually truth. It's just an opinion, right? So you can use cognitive access analysis to pick out sentences that people say when they start talking about belief or opinions. You know, I feel good about these numbers, or that's a good price. The sentence, that's a good price, is an FITE statement, okay? You know, or when someone says, I think that's a good price, that's a TIFE statement because it has I think for TI. I think that's a good. I think that's a good, right? Or I feel that's a good. I feel that's a good, right? So it's completely different. So you have to be aware of these things. This is why it's possible using cognitive access analysis alone. A robot, an AI system could be developed to actually extract people's cognitive axes directly from their text messages on social media or anything they post on Twitter or Facebook at any given time. It's really easy to do. You just have to know how to code these different things using statistical models, and then boom, there you have it, right? In fact, there's already a system in development for that. So something to be aware of, right? Logic is a big deal because logic is different. It's like if this, then that, if this, then that. Everything is compared with one reference point instead of a series of reference points. And the reference point is true versus false. That is one reference point compared to another. A TE user compares from a reference point from many directions, right? So they make these statements. Well, let's look at perception. Like, perception is about experiences or things that are happening in space-time. It's all about occurrences or what's happening or what's going to happen or what has happened, right? Perception is nothing more than someone's personal location or other people's personal location in space-time. That's all it is. It's a human being's awareness of space-time. That is perception. So three-dimensional space, and when did it happen? Where and when and where did it happen? Where will it happen? Okay. Where did it happen is SE. Okay. When will it happen? Where did it happen to those people or to that person is SE. When will it happen is NE, right? Or when do I want it to happen? That's NI, right? Or it happened to me. That's SI, okay? Now, how do you get it to an axis? How do you convert it to an axis? You convert it into an axis by doing statements like this. Hey, I really like that place, FITE, because I had such a great experience there. You are going to want to do it too. That's an SINE statement. Or, I'm not comfortable with doing that. I know you want me to do that, NE. I'm not comfortable, SI. Okay, that's an NE-SI statement. Okay. SE and I is like, oh, I see what you're doing there. I want to do it with you. That's an SE, and I see what you're doing, which is SE. I want to do it with you. That's NI. Right? Or, wow, that person made a bad mistake, or they made a bad choice. I'm not making that choice. That's an NI statement. Right? And then, or I don't know why people want to do that. I don't know why people want to go buy that car. I used to own that car. That car sucked. That's an SI statement saying that other people don't want to have that experience that that person had. Okay? So you could literally break down sentences people say into cognitive axes. So let's say you're looking at an essay, okay, that someone is saying of 1,000 words, okay, and how they're explaining it. You look at each sentence and you determine which on the cognitive axes, and sometimes there's multiple axes occurring per sentence, and you write them all down. You circle various areas of the essay and you write down which cognitive axis is applied to it. And eventually you'll see that there is a majority axis for 1P or 1J axis. There's 2 J axes and 2 P axes, okay? And eventually you'll see that 1P axis and 1J axis are very prevalent within the document itself, okay? Or this could be an audio recording or a video recording of some kind or a movie. You can pull out cognitive axes and then you write down how many times you see of each axis. And whichever is the most for P and whichever is the most for J becomes their axis. And then once you have identified their axis, so let's look at it this way. Let's look at purple here. Okay, we see that this person is saying SENI, and we found out that they are also a TEFI user. Okay, so that means they have these functions. These 4 functions. The majority of the time, they're using these 4 functions. Well, guess what type has SE, FI, TE, and I in the top 4 functions? Well, so it's SFP, NTJ, Quadra. Okay? These 4 types have these 4 functions. This is why people who are ESFPs, that's why they think they're ENTJs. Because ENTJs they have the same 4 functions as ESFPs, right? So why is this important to the type grid? Well, how is this relevant? Well, if you can identify their cognitive axis, check this out. Let's assume that we have no idea what their J axis is, and we just know that they're an SCNI user, and that's it. Well, let's go to the type grid. If we only know they're an SCNI user, that means they are not this type, they're 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 not this type. You know, oh wait, they are ISFP, excuse me. They're not this type and they're not this type, okay? So we've just eliminated half of the types by identifying 1 axis. You see how important this is now with the type grid? It's pretty important, huh? If you can just identify 1 axis that they're using primarily, you've just eliminated half the types, okay? And let's say you identify the TEFI axis. So then let's get rid of all the TEFI, the TIFE users, which they are not, from the type grid. Well, they can't be that, you know. They can't be that. They can't be that. And they can't be that. Which means, oops. Yeah, here we go. Which means they can only be SFPs. See, we have 2 SFPs here and NTJs. Oh, SFP, NTJ, Quadra. Oh, all these people with these same functions that are showing up in the cognitive axes, right? Okay. This is how you use cognitive axis analysis combined with quadras to identify types. So is this any good? Well, here's the thing. When you're doing cognitive axis plus quadras together, it will really only bring you to these 4 choices, okay? Where you are able to see, I've just eliminated all those types and I've got them down to 4. And then once you reduce it down to 4, you just go over to communication styles and disposition. Okay, well, is this person direct? Yes. Okay, well, they're direct. Great. We automatically know they're not these because they're informative. It brings it down to 2. Okay. Well, they're both abstract. Yeah, that's abstract. So they're both here still. They're both systematic, so they're both still here. Okay, so automatically NTs, because we know they're intellectuals, because they're both systematic and whatnot, which means we have to use communication style to figure out which one they are. Because we know they're not artisans, we know they're intellectuals, but which communication style? Well, they're both direct. Well, that's hard. Okay, well, one's initiating and one's responding, one's control and one's movement. If this guy is control, that means he's outcome focused, right? It's all about the outcome, okay? It's all about the outcome. And then we have the INTJ, which is more so about the process. How are we going to get there? See, control types are all about the why. Movement types are all about the how. Movement types don't really care so much about the goal as long as they get somewhere. Control types care about the how, or care about the why. They just don't care how they get there. That's the big difference between control versus movement. Outcome versus process, okay? And then we found out that this person is definitely outcome focused, so there can only be an ENTJ, basically. So when you combine cognitive access analysis to quadras, you will eliminate 12 types at most to get to 4, and then you use communication styles and disposition to solve for the final 4, basically. So use the vectors in that regard. Now, we already talked about how to use we already talked about communication and style and dispositions from the point of, like that photo that was provided. I haven't delved deep enough in that. I just know it's another vector. That's why I'm listing it here. I mean, I'm still learning too, as much as everyone else is, but it is an additional vector to the type grid. That's why I'm listing it, even though I haven't fleshed it out quite yet. So now let's go into the really, really hard one. The really, really hard one, which is cognitive orbit. And this one's really hard because I've barely talked about it. And it's really, I mean, I could do it pretty fine, but other people, it's a struggle. So let's get rid of these marks here. You know what, actually, I'm just gonna use the eraser. Okay. Cognitive orbit. Draw. And let's do blue this time. Cognitive orbit. So let's look at an ESFP, shall we? Let's look at an ESFP. I'm in the mood for ESFP land today. So we have SE, FI, TE, and I. Okay, that's the first 4 of their ego. Okay, what happens when we look at the unconscious? We end up having SI, FE, TI, and E. Okay, but here's the difference. We know with cognitive access analysis that these functions are connected together in a certain way. So using the red, let's put in the axis. So SI is always connected with NE, right? And TI is always connected to FE, right? And then we have NI always connected to SE, and FI always connected to TE. Those are cognitive axes. We've already talked about those. But what happens when we talk about cognitive orbit? Well, the SE is connected to the SI, and it goes in both directions. It's a two-way street. Okay. The SE is connected to the FI. Well, same thing here, all the way across. They're also connected. Same thing here. They are also connected. What this does is it creates something called cognitive orbit activation, something that will need to be added to the glossary. Of course, all of these things are activations. So all these things, think of them as like planets or atoms or protons, electrons, you know, spinning around each other, right? Cognitive orbit is what affects one affects the other, okay? So we know that axis, cognitive axis, which we have, which is really hard to see for some reason because I decided to use red ink like a madman. I should probably not use red ink. Let's just add some green in here for a nice little Christmas effect, because why not? I too like green. So we got our cognitive axes in there. But let's look at the orbit. What's with the orbit? Why does it matter? Now, obviously in cognitive axis, what affects one affects the other because it's coming out in our sentences, right? It comes out with how we communicate. It comes out with how we behave, right? You know, how we do our sentences, how we perceive things, how we make decisions. The cognitive orbit is something a little bit different. What happens to one function in an orbit automatically impacts another. So right here we have a hero function, okay? So what affects this hero automatically affects this nemesis function over here, okay? Now, granted, they're not stacked on top of each other like one would expect, so that means that this is the parent, this is the child, this is the inferior. Over here, we have the critic, the trickster, and then we have the demon, okay? So what affects one affects the other. I think the best example of cognitive orbit out there, and by the way, this is what we call primary orbit. This is primary. This is primary orbit. Something that needs to be written down and understood. This is primary orbit. We're going to talk about secondary orbit in a second, but primary orbit, what affects one of these affects the other, okay? So extroverted sensing hero, when it's giving a good experience to others, it makes the introverted sensing nemesis more comfortable. If the introverted sensing nemesis is uncomfortable, they need to find somebody else and make that person comfortable so that the SI nemesis can be comfortable itself. Okay? Let's look at the critic. The critic does not like being guilted into things. It's feeling guilted, which automatically makes the person feel bad because it's being guilted. Wait a minute. This is a problem. This is a serious problem. Why? Well, let's look at a different color, a horse of a different color here. You know, let's just do brown. Let's look at the color of fecal matter, shall we? Notice we have FI, which is sympathy. Notice we have FE, which is empathy. Don't you get tired of all those people whining about the difference between sympathy and empathy? They can't tell the difference. It's so annoying. Why is that? Why is that, guys? Why? Well, let's take a look at an INFP, shall we? FI hero, NE parent, SI child, TE inferior, okay? And then we have FE nemesis. Wait just a minute, but this is sympathy, Mr. C.S. Joseph. You're right. It is sympathy. Well, this is empathy, Mr. C.S. Joseph. You're right. It is empathy. Mr. C.S. Joseph, does that mean an INFP is capable of feeling sympathy and empathy simultaneously? Yes. Yes, that's exactly what that means. The question is which one's primary? Primarily, INFPs feel sympathy. They are capable of feeling empathy for people. And they mostly are motivated to do it because they're worried that they're selfish. They're worried that they're not giving enough, so they are empathetic to other people, and then they mislabel it with their little T inferior belief system that it's sympathy because they're used to giving sympathy with their introverted feeling hero because their SI has created a habit, because SI is all about habit. This is why SE users have a hard time making habits. It's no different. It's literally the same thing, gentlemen and ladies. Because, see, this is why you have INFPs out there complaining that, oh, I'm definitely empathetic. I'm an empath. No, you're a sympath who just happens to be empathic sometimes. And you only do it from a negative, worried filter because you're worried that you're not caring enough, because you already know that you're pretty selfish. That's why these people think that they know the difference between sympathy and empathy when they really don't. And they think they're being sympathetic, but they aren't. You have to understand, guys, every human being, doesn't matter regardless of type, you are capable of feeling sympathy and empathy. You're capable of it. It's just which one is more than the other. The one that is more makes you the sympath. If your FI is more. If your FE is more, it makes you an empath, an empathic. That's why I laugh every time. Like my INTJX, who's like, ooh, I'm an empath. And I'm like, no, you're not. You're a sympath. You actually don't understand anything about this. I'm sorry. But that's a fact, right? You know? So, primary orbit. Let me erase this here because don't want this too cluttered. Don't want this too cluttered. So, awesome. Primary orbit. What affects one function affects the other. Let's look at it this way. What happens when NI inferior has its choice taken away? If I go up to an ESFP and I take away their choice, guess what happens? The demon immediately activates because of the orbit. The inferior function, where a person's fear exists, fear can lead to violence from the demon. Oh, you're enslaving me? You're taking away my choice? Fine. Nobody gets a choice. If I don't get a choice, nobody does. That is NI inferior versus any demon of an ESFP. All right. If someone takes away my choice, no one gets choice. No one. And why? When you ask the ESFP why that is, they're like, I spend all this time making everybody else so comfortable with my SE hero, and I am choosing to make other people comfortable and have shared experiences with them and doing things with them and make them comfortable and making sure their life is not boring, and go out of my way for this. And you have the audacity to take away my choice? Great. No one gets a choice. Oh, look, that's a cognitive axis. The cognitive axis feeds into the cognitive orbit. Look at it this way. Here's your axis. Here's your orbit. Look. It's a yin and yang equilibrium, also known as, because the original Ouroboros was a yin and yang, an Ouroboros. What affects one affects the other. The axis, I'm going out of my way to make you really, really comfortable because I want to do that. I want to make you as comfortable as possible. I want to have shared experiences with you. I want to have your attention. SE absorbs others' attention. SE needs attention. If SE does not have attention, they feel unwanted, like as if they're not cool enough to have shared experiences with. And it's like, and then they feel obligated. And then because of that, it's like as if their choice is being taken away from them. I've done all these great things for you, and now you're taking away my choice, really? Well, then you get my any demon. I'm going to take away everyone's choice. No one gets a choice until I do, because I have gone out of my way to make you as comfortable as possible, right? That's the worst part of an ESFP. That's where an ESFP's sin nature or human condition comes from. Everyone has something like that. So that's an orbit. That's a cognitive orbit when you have the inferior function and the NE function. So knowing orbits, you can know up to 4 to 8 different behaviors within a human being, because what affects one function in the ego affects the other in the unconscious, and vice versa, for a total of 4 vectors. Primary orbits, which is ego to unconscious. Secondary orbit, which is unconscious to ego. 8 possible vectors of cognitive orbit. In each of these cognitive orbits, okay, you can identify specific behaviors. So if you want to identify someone's type, go for their gateway functions. It's very easy. Gateway functions are the easiest functions to go for because they're they're necessary for cognitive transition. Go up to that ESFP and take away their choice, or make them perceive that they're taking away their choice, and see how they behave. Oh, this person is really, really sensitive about having their freedom taken away from them. That means they have NI inferior, which means they could only be these 2 types here, ESFP and ESTP. They can only be those 2 types. You've just eliminated 14 of the 16 types just off of that alone. But it's a lot of information to keep track of. It's really complicated. Cognitive orbit is really, really complicated. It's really hard. When there's communication styles and disposition and cognitive axis and quadras, why would you spend so much time doing cognitive orbit? There is a use case for it. The use case for using cognitive orbit is when you are talking to someone in their 60s and they're so well integrated and so mature, and the older the person is, the harder it is to do, that it doesn't matter what communication style or disposition or cognitive axis or quadrants you go to, because they're able to cognitive transition so easily between the 4 sides of their mind because of how integrated they are. It's really hard to tell which one is their ego, which is how we determine which their type is, by identifying the ego. It's really, really hard. So then your only option then is to use cognitive orbit to try to eliminate it further, because you'll identify their quadra, and then you'll identify the quadra of also their subconscious, because they're bouncing back and forth between their ego and their subconscious that you can't tell. You can't, right? Or they're bouncing back and forth from their unconscious. Maybe both of them, maybe all of them. It's so hard to tell. Well, how do you do that? Well, cognitive orbit is another way for you to verify that what it is. So you do a behavior targeting a specific kind of function. It doesn't matter which of the 8, and so you're literally shoving information into a function to see how it comes back to you. Basically, that's cognitive orbit. It's like the slingshot effect. When you're orbiting a planet and taking advantage of its gravity to accelerate yourself around the planet to come back at a different trajectory, could be back towards the Earth, using the gravity of the moon to slingshot a space probe or a spaceship back to the Earth, right? That slingshot effect, by using gravity, it's literally the same thing with cognitive orbit analysis. You are throwing information at a cognitive function as if that function is a planet. The information swings around the planet and it comes back to you in a different form. And depending on how it comes back to you in that form, it exhibits a certain behavior, and you know where in their cognitive orbits do they lie, between secondary orbits or primary orbits. And that will help you identify, okay, which of these 2 types do they have to be? And then you go through everything again against those 2 types by identifying that one function. But here's the thing. You can keep sending information with their cognitive orbits and hit different functions, different planets, basically, to get that slingshot effect to come back to you. And then all of a sudden, you're actually able to eliminate even more types from the type grid, such that you finally arrive to the conclusion as to which type they actually are, even if they are a 70-year-old person who's super integrated and super mature. and super happy in their life. It's really, really hard to type an elderly person who is happy. Really hard. It's hard, but possible. Because they've just become so integrated, they've become so changed over time, it makes it really, really hard, right? So that's cognitive orbit analysis. That's how you do it. It's just a lot of information to keep track of, right? This is the advanced of the advanced of the advanced in typing somebody. This is why publicly I've only really provided the communication styles and the disposition temperaments in the form of the type grid to people, so that they just use those two vectors, because predominantly that's really all you need. But as people get older and more advanced and more integrated, it becomes a problem, because, wow, I can't tell if they're cognitive transitioning or not. That's when it's hard to type people. This is why people get so pissed off at me when I suggest that Mila Kunis is actually an INTJ. They get really mad. Did you guys know that Jessica Alba is an INTJ? Yeah, I never thought you'd see that coming, but it's true. She's an INTJ. Mila Kunis is an INTJ. But she's cognitive transition during the interviews as an ESFP, because that's the subconscious. That's why you have to go deeper with these other vectors around the type grid to be able to utilize the type grid properly. You can always default to deductive reasoning to find out how it works. You can always default to that. So, excellent. That concludes the lecture component of this conference. I'd like to open it up to questions now from who we have on this thing here. So I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'm going to open up to questions right now regarding vectors for the type grid. We showed 7 vectors today. There is an 8th vector, but I am not willing to speak of it today. It is way too advanced and definitely not something to be talked about later. It's something that I talk about like with certain members of my team, but definitely not something we'll be talking about now. But and honestly, when we re-release the type grid, it will be just the 7 vectors and not the 8th one. So any questions regarding today's presentation that we've done so far? Anyone can raise their hand or just start talking. I'm cool with that.
So you talked about primary and secondary orbit. Is there any like orbit between other sides of the mind than just ego and unconscious?
Kind of. The answer to that is yes, but it manifests in a way. That's a little bit different. For example, you hear me talk about concepts known as the demonic child. Basically, the demonic child, and I was not actually prepared to talk about this today, but good question. I'll answer it. Yes, Kayla's all smiles today, and so is Mr. Domes. All right, 4 sides of the mind, right? Imagine the 4 sides, or actually, you know what? I'll whiteboard it, because why not? Why not? Why not whiteboard it? I'm going back to the whiteboard here. And I'm actually just going to pull up my eraser and erase it. Because why not? Why not? Erasing. I'm bad at erasing. You know those people when they're erasing the whiteboard and their ass is shaking as they do it? That's like literally what I'm doing right now. No, I'm just playing. All right, so we're erasing tons of stuff.
Oh, what if you just wipe the whole board at one hit?
Oh, okay. Well, that would make a lot of sense. I don't know how to do that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh, the clear button. Clear. Okay, thanks. The clear button. Thank you for pointing out the obvious, because as an ENTP, I don't understand obvious. I'm not an SE user. SE users are all about obvious. Okay, so 4 sides of the mind. It's funny because this is actually part of season 17, episode 5. So you're going to get a little bit of preview of the next lecture that's coming out. So let's look at this. Again, ESFP. I'm very ESFP focused right now. There's a reason for that. It does not necessarily have anything to do with certain people who are on the conference right now, I promise. It's actually because of a lecture. I'm actually been looking at ESFP pretty hard in the lecture. And then we have NITE, FI, NITE, FISE, NETIFESI. Okay, and then over here, we're going to have NETIFESI, NITEFISE. And can anyone guess which types these are? Oh, actually, it's pretty obvious, I guess. So this is an ESFP right here. And this is an ENTP, my type right here. What's the relationship between these 2 types? Can anyone tell me what is the relationship that these 2 types have? Anyone? Go ahead and give a guess. It's all good.
They're both starters.
They are each other's superegos.
Yes, they are each other's superegos. And they also are starters, so both answers are correct technically. But they are each other's superego. So the ENTP down here is in the superego slot, and the ESFP down here is in the superego slot. This is also known, according to socionics, the enigma relationship. Okay. The enigma relationship, according to socionics. Very, very key. So, so what happens for cognitive orbit to the other sides of your mind, right? I talk about something known as the demonic child. The demonic child, right? Which is this, right? The demonic child. When these 2 functions team up with each other, right? Sometimes functions can also spin on different axes and spin with each other if there is no other function in the way. For example, the demon and the child can also spin. Okay. Which is another form of not really identifying their type, but identifying their maturity level or their level of integration, which is super advanced, and we're not going to talk about that today. This is why I haven't talked about loops. Cognitive loop, which is another term for that book, Mr. Dome's Cognitive Loop, but it is super advanced and it's beyond intermediate. We're not even going to be talking about that anytime soon. We'll get to that later. It's another subject for another day. But the demonic child, so I'll just put that here. Demonic child. What happens to, so we have hero, parent, child, inferior, for example. We'll just do the top 4. What happens if I'm going to take the 4 sides of a mind and then flip them and change their position? Their roles change. Their frames of second change. Their awareness changes, right? That's what happens. So then you end up having functions and slots that they wouldn't have been before, right? So the demonic hero occurs after what we call an ego shift. Ego shift. And an ego shift is basically when this here, the superego, and this here switch places. An ego shift. And it changes everything. It changes everything. When do ego shifts happen? They happen with times relating to serious trauma, PTSD, which is trauma, but it's serious trauma, like head trauma, like physical trauma. It can also be psychological trauma, which takes a lot longer, but physical trauma could actually be instantaneous. Psychological trauma, it could take over a decade or two before an ego shift can actually take place, right? It's a serious amount of trauma. So when ego shift occurs, the positions change. However, without an ego shift, let's say your ego doesn't shift in the process, well, guess what? Then the positions don't change, but it could be, hello. No, be quiet, Siri. British Siri is talking to me. The demonic child, ends up, things like the demonic child end up manifesting, or the demonic parent, because ultimately any function could basically obtain any particular role depending on cognitive orbit, depending on cognitive axis, depending on the positions of the four sides of the mind as they change, but depending on ego shift, right? So to answer your question, Mr. Domes.